I may be unique in Texas political history for wanting to go on the Texas Ethics Commission, and Speaker Strauss, in his astonishment, granted that request. And furthermore, I asked to be a debater this evening on this particular very controversial subject. I think you're beginning to see a pattern of reckless behavior, which may or may not be proven by what I proceed to say. But I'm grateful for the chance to talk on this topic. You know, in a typical debate, the affirmative, which I am, is the one who makes the proposal to change, and the negative is the one who defends the status quo. Well, I happen to be the affirmative defending the status quo, which is disclosure of campaign contributions and expenditures. But I welcome this because, being a conservative, I think the status quo is usually the right way to go, particularly if something is proven and is accepted in our politics as political disclosure. The subhead for tonight's discussion refers to it as forced disclosure. Well, it is true that it is required by law, and law does tend to have a certain mandate to it. These are not suggestions, these are not nice to have matters. Disclosure is required, so I suppose it is forced. A word or two about the body of which I serve. The Texas Ethics Commission has 8 members divided by construct between Democrats and Republicans. It was created in 1991 after a particular scandal involving the then Speaker of the House. I should note that that was 10 years after I left the legislature and 14 years before Joe Strauss entered the legislature, so it is completely an innocent body from the rest of us. We have only civil jurisdiction, no criminal responsibilities whatsoever. We can issue penalties, namely fines, but nothing more than that. And what often gets us attention are so-called sworn complaints, which can be filed by any citizen of the state of Texas, and by law we must hear, no discretion whatsoever. The Texas Ethics Commission is in an odd circumstance in which we are attacked from both left and right for totally different reasons. On the left, the Texans for Public Justice have referred to us as toothless, and the Texas Observer called us a notoriously hapless entity. On the right, the Wall Street Journal called us the Lone Star Political Police, and Mr. Michael Quinn Sullivan of Empower Texans and Texans for Fiscal Responsibility has called us the thuggish brute squad of the Austin establishment, which may be slightly better than being the brutish thug squad of the establishment. I'm not here representing the Texas Ethics Commission. I'm here as Chase Untermeyer just happens to be a member. And I should say that the celebrated case involving Mr. Sullivan and Empower Texans was not about disclosure, but about lobby registration, a totally different subject. Disclosure is an issue in the electoral process. So I will confine my comments to that, to the electoral process and disclosure. If there are any questions about that case, we can deal with those in the question and answer period afterwards. The law, which is the Texas Government Code, mandates the Texas Ethics Commission to achieve the following objectives. And these are to control and reduce the cost of elections, to eliminate opportunities for undue influence over elections and governmental actions, to disclose fully information related to expenditures and contributions for elections and for petitioning the government, to enhance the potential for individual participation in the electoral and governmental processes, and to ensure the public's confidence and trust in government. Those have been the established principles for 40 years. And yet I have to tell you that as innocent and accepted as it would seem, there is a bill pending filed by an esteemed member of the Texas Senate to expunge from the law books of Texas everything I just read to you. So vile, so offensive, so wretched are they that they have to be taken out of the law. This is why I view, as a conservative, this entire question of doing away with disclosure or not requiring it for all political groups not to be conservatism at all, but radicalism, since it seeks to root out these objectives and to change the principles of government. And why? The answer is so a very few, very rich people can shield their political activity from public view and disclosure. You know, for the sake of this debate in this hall, I wish that our battle with Mr. Sullivan was with a left-wing group rather than a right one. But as I said, the Ethics Commission is required to act on every complaint. We have no discretion. And because these issues transcend ideology and party. In Texas, there are no limits to what a person may give in a campaign and no limits to what a candidate may spend in a campaign. I support that. And you will not hear me call for any limits on campaign contributions and expenditures, and least of all will you hear me argue for such things as public financing. But the key point is this: in such a generous atmosphere and circumstance where there are no limits on spending and contributions, disclosure is a small and simple thing for the public to expect. I should say that disclosure is not a cure for corruption. It is simply a tool for voters who wish to be informed before casting a ballot. It's left to the press and to social media as to how to use that. I do believe in disclosure. I believe in transparency. I think the public expects it. And we in the Texas Ethics Commission, by enforcing the law, which means forced disclosure, I suppose, are not in the business of telling groups, least of all one like the Texas Public Policy Foundation, to shut up or disband. There is no restriction on free speech to that regard. But if any nonprofit corporation, a 501c3 or 4, that engages in political activity can just wrap itself in the cloak of anonymity, then nobody is going to create a political action committee and to disclose their spending accordingly. It is true that donors in politics may be subject to criticism or even vilification, but this is not retaliation and persecution, the language used in our program this evening. It's called something else. It's called politics. It may not be pretty or pleasant, but it is not recrimination. And if those wealthy people who do not want to have their names disclosed use the political process to cut off that avenue of the public, then we are the poorer for it. I readily concede that one day a court may declare that freedom of expression trumps disclosure. But until that day, we will continue to enforce the law. Finally, it was Thomas Jefferson who said in 1816, not really planning to make a poem, I think, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be." Thank you very much.